James said, a lot of us are moving in a direction that we don't really want to be in regards to our health. We're not going to talk about health today. We're going to talk about business and why what we put into our body affects our output. Just this last week, I was able to speak in the Cyprus edition of the Chick-fil-A Leadercast. We talked about using food and using nutrition and balancing out the chemistry of our body and the electrical activity of our body can help us to become better leaders. Well, it also applies to the effects we have in our bodies to become better businessmen. The ability to look at somebody in the eye when you talk to them is partially a neurologic and hormonal component. And when those chemical and electrical processes in the body are not working, you can't look at somebody. Your self-confidence diminishes. You don't present and make a strong case for your product, service, or widget. So from the inside of your body, if you can reduce stress, if you can not have chemical responses that aren't supposed to occur when we eat food occur, then we're going to see serious changes in our body just from an dietary intake. So when we look at our body, and because we're looking to see what chemical processes are going to ensue after anything we do, whether it's eating your lunch, drinking something at a networking event, or just living your every single day, normal, everyday life, and how its effect is not only going to affect your health, such as your aches and pains and your weight, your hormones and things like that, but also that communication process that comes from your brain to your mouth so that you can make that sales pitch, or so that you can talk to your employees, or that you can talk to your spouse and your kids. So when we look and see what really goes on into our life, we're going to be talking about what is known as leaky gut or intestinal permeability. See, there are a lot of factors up at the top that affect how our body digests and assimilates food. So I keep telling James not to stress out, because if you get stressed out, he's going to die early and he's not going to live to be 125 with me. But if he has stress, it's going to make him not be able to digest his food appropriately, and he's going to have negative responses to that food as well. Or if he's having immune burdens, or if he's eating the inappropriate foods, where he's causing inflammation into his body, a certain cascade of effects occur directly into the brain. So your gut is the barrier between you and the rest of the world. We're like a big donut. We have a hole that comes here, and there's a tube straight down until it leaves. And the only thing that allows us to get food or particles from that tube is our gut. And when that shuts down or doesn't work, we become dysfunctional. So, if we have dietary proteins or peptides, those are the things you eat, they create inflammation into the body and go where they're not supposed to go because we've thinned out our gut, we create problems later on in life. We've got immune burdens like antibodies, or we take too many drugs, or whether recreational or non or prescription, they may be the perfect thing for the perfect time. But if we do that for 40 years, we start to have issues because our bodies aren't designed to live off of chemicals. When we go and we have physical stress and infections, and cytokines is a fancy word for inflammation, so the inflammatory response that we have, these types of things wear down that barrier between what we ingest, what we absorb, and the barriers that allow foods that aren't supposed to go into our brain or into our organs to penetrate through. But it doesn't stop at just foods. So when we have these stressors, you see this big arrow here is knocking havoc through the cellular walls of our gut. That's a fancy word for stomach, liver, gallbladder, colon, those organs that are part of that tube system. So when we thin that lining down, we allow things that aren't supposed to get into our body to freely circulate through our bloodstream. And that becomes a problem. How many of you have ever heard of an opiate before? Raise your hand if you've ever smoked opium. No, I'm just joking. Alright, so an opiate is a type of chemical that comes naturally in a bunch of things. Your foods have opiates in them. You can go smoke things that have opiates in them. You can take morphine or heroin. Those are all opiates. And opiates make a special response in our brain. They cause us to separate from reality. If you're out on the battlefield and you get shot, and someone shoots morphine into your leg, you have been separated from your reality and you no longer feel the pain or the gaping wound that is there, and that's a great response in that time. If you are a crackhead down in downtown and you shoot up heroin for fun on the weekends, you are separating your life from reality because you're affecting the opiate responses to the receptors in your brain. Now, interestingly enough, normal everyday food will have opiates as well. And these normal everyday foods should never ever penetrate into the brain or into the circulation system unless this response has occurred. So how many of you had opiates today? Raise your hand. You don't know, right? None of us went, did heroin or morphine for fun. But if we did something like gluten, or casein, or soy, All of those break down to opiates into our body. So gluten is found in wheat, barley, rye, and cross-contaminated oats. Dairy comes from anything in a cow's udder. And soy is a plant that grows in the Orient. So therefore, if we consume those things and we have a leaky gut, we are having an opiate response in our brain. And so some of you, after consuming your lunch today, may have felt a little bit tired, maybe a little pick-me-up. You'll get a cup of coffee, maybe a 5-hour energy drink or some other type of drink like that. You may sleep 8 hours at night and wake up completely tired again, like you didn't even sleep at all. You may be having weight gain or hormonal disturbances. You may have tried dieting before and eaten only fruits and vegetables for 5 or 6 days before you just went nuts and killed somebody because you're having a withdrawal response from the opiate effect in your brain. These types of effects happen from the chemical nature of food. And if our gut was strong enough, we would not have had those. Now, why does that matter to you guys? Because the number one symptom that comes from the opiate response from everyday foods is brain fog. So how many of you have been in a presentation before and are looking across the table to that guy and you're trying to sell him or her something, and all of a sudden you can't remember why you're there, where your notes are, why they should be buying your product at all, and you're just sitting there like this. And it could be something as simple as eating that piece of bread before you went into that meeting. Because your gut is weak. Strengthen up the gut, take out the food sensitivities, take out the food allergens, and we start seeing an immediate change in your body as it has time to go back and repair and heal and grow. I'm not saying wheat is the Antichrist. I'm saying that when our bodies are so destroyed, wheat becomes a problem, just like morphine, heroin, and other opiates that we can consume. And they create symptoms, and they affect business propositions, they affect leadership traits and qualities, they affect the ability to stare someone in the eye and shake their hand and say, "Hi Sherry, my name is Dr. Chase, it's a pleasure to meet you." That's a problem that affects business. And it affects a bunch of other things. Our relationship with our wife, our spouse, our relationship with our kids, the ability to go teach a bunch of Cub Scouts how to tie knots. Whatever it is in our everyday lives, if this becomes a problem, it affects brain and chemical activity. So what do we do about it? Well, first we have to identify what's going on. And then we have to see what it really does to us and why. So from a dietary standpoint, dietary proteins, the ones we talked about specifically today were gluten, casein, and soy. They break down into the proteins called glutenomorphin, soymorphin, and casomorphin, which sound a lot like morphine, a lot like an opiate. And if we don't have the specific digestive enzymes or the natural gut health, these opiate peptides now start creating problems as they go through the intestinal permeable cells, and they start circulating into the bloodstream. It becomes a problem. So all we have to do is take those out of our life. We start seeing a change in our moods. We start seeing a change in our hormones, and our weight, and our aggressive patterns, addiction. I've had patients that come to me because I'm a chiropractor by profession. They come in for weird stuff, back pain or headaches or weight loss or whatever. And then all of a sudden they say, "You know what, Chase? I'm not addicted to porn anymore. What are you doing?" And that's weird. Most people don't go to their chiropractor because they have porn addictions. But most people. But they come in and they start seeing a change in their chemistry of their brain. Because they're no longer having these needs to go through the addictive processes anymore. And so it's a big thing that happens when you can change the intestinal permeability in your body because it protects you again from the environment. So it's not uncommon to see changes in relationships, changes in business, changes in whatever, because the body is healing itself and all those other things were just symptoms. So when the intestinal permeability becomes a problem, it does a bunch of stuff here, don't worry about that. But basically, it decreases your perception from reality in response to pain, in response to behavior, in response to social deficiencies, ability to communicate, talk to other people, and in response to cognitive development. So something as simple as the food we put into our bodies disconnects us from our world and from our environment. It can be a problem for some people. We already talked about gluten, casein, and soy. Those are the three most common inflammatory foods that we as a society consume. On average, the American will consume 6 to 8 servings of wheat, dairy, or soy a day. That's a lot. Like I said, if we've got these intestinal permeability problems and we're having these opiates go in and affect our brain, it becomes an issue. I know we're up on our 10 minutes, so I want to leave you with this last list here of other foods based off of blood type that are inflammatory in nature. And as you look at this, I can see all of your jaws dropping as shock is taking over. Because it's everything you consume on an everyday basis. So I'm not saying these are avoids for the rest of your life. We're saying these are avoids until you fix your gut, and until you see the change in sales, until you see the leadership development in your own life. And you go with these foods and avoid them until it's no longer a problem. And most people experience weight changes and hormonal changes, and they see a great change in their life all the way around because their brain chemistry is now improved. Now, I know most of you are trying to frantically write this down. Just give me a shout later and I'll email you this whole presentation. You can dissect it. My cards are back here, so just come throw your cards at me and I'll email you everything that I've talked about today. So I appreciate your time. You guys are great, in a great position here to be networking with great leaders in the industries, to learn valuable tips. You guys are in a great position in your fields, and I appreciate you guys for being out here and supporting us today. An incredible networking, and we'd love to see you guys out later again. Thank you.